And in front of me, there's a guy walking, and I recognized him from the hostel. So as we get to the entrance of the subway, that subway entrance was actually closed, so we couldn't go inside. And this a little bit of inconvenience made us strike up a conversation. So we had this conversation and exchanged the usual, where you're from, what are you doing here, type things. And then I told him it was my birthday and I had no plan and I was heading off into New York to just see what happens.
Bring your imagination to life with inspiring stories of an incredible and very real world.
I remember leaving Chicago. It was 2013 and I had finished my last contract, or like I had been working in the States for 3 years. I'm originally from South Africa, so I went to work in country clubs in the States and I spent 3 years doing that, mainly so that I could dance salsa, I'm not going to lie, and so that I could just experience life in America and get to travel and, yeah, mainly dance salsa. There I was living in the States for 3 years, and this was the end of it. So I planned a 10-day trip in New York. I'd never been, and I thought that would be the perfect way to end my 3-year chapter in the States and then also celebrate my 29th birthday. So here I was chatting to everybody about this amazing trip in New York, which I had planned. And they were giving me all these hidden gems and all these places to go to and all these things to see and where to get the best view and what to eat. And I just had all these amazing things that I had to do. So I made a list and I wrote it down and I mapped it out and basically had this itinerary, intense itinerary for these days that I was going to be there. And I was stay awake until 7 a.m. on the one night and go out and find some salsa and just do all these things and see all these places. And this was my trip and I was so excited. And then I packed up my life and I headed off to New York. So I'm sitting at the airport in North Carolina. And here I am in transit at this airport with my list. And I'm looking at all these things that I have to do. And that's when it hit me. You know, I just quit my job. I'd ended a career path and I was technically in transition with my life. I was homeless. I was jobless. I was just free. I was free from the system. I was technically just free for the next couple of days, or like I was free for the foreseeable future until I found a new job and a new path. I think the plan back then was to move back home to South Africa and then head off to Mexico afterwards. But yeah, I was free. And here I was, as free as a bird, with a to-do list. A list of all the things that I want to see and do in New York. And this list was essentially just that. It was a to-do list of things for me to see. So as I'm looking at this list of all these things I really, really, really want to see, but it's just bringing me so much anxiety because I'm free. I'm like, why would I shackle myself to a to-do list when I'm free? So as I'm sitting in front of the gate, I tear up this list and I throw it away. And I just felt so happy afterwards. I felt so free. And I had freed myself from my own shackles. So there I was, free and without a list and without a plan. And I headed off to New York. So I arrive in New York and I go and check into the place that I'm staying in. I stayed at the New York Loft Hostel in Brooklyn, which was a great location. And yeah, that's when the magic happened. I think it all started from that first night in the hostel where, because everything was so unplanned, everything that happened after that just seemed perfect. It was as if the universe just opened up the magic to me. I met my first friend when I checked into my room. She was this girl who had a bunch of festival bands on her arm. She was really tired. She had come back from a music festival and she had been traveling. And funnily enough, she was actually South African as well. So we got to chatting and we hung out for a bit. We had dinner and then she went to bed. But it was really nice to see somebody like fun, vibey and friendly. Later the night, my friend's cousin called me and we started chatting. because he lives in New York, and he was like, let's meet up because he lived around the corner. So we met up and we went to this bar where all of his artwork was hanging, and he was an artist. And the funny thing about this is that on my list, every time I travel, I put down meet with an artist because somehow I just hope that the travel wins, or even if I usually try and schedule it, or I try and find an artist in the city that I can meet up with, just so that I can get some inspiration for the year. I can just be around somebody super creative. Yeah, so this was my first night, and I had already ticked off something on my list. Got to hang out with an artist, and he showed me a bit about Brooklyn, and we went down to Manhattan. We got to walk around at night, and just walking around at night in New York with an artist, hearing about how he creates his work and the creative process, and just living in New York. And then we ended up at this Japanese bar that was a speakeasy. So when you walk in, it's quite empty until the bartender pulls the curtain, and you go down to the next floor and it's filled with people. So that was really nice. That was my first night in New York, yeah. And the next day I woke up, and the next day was my birthday. So I set off, I head out of the hostel, and I walk towards the subway without a plan, just to see what happens. And in front of me, there's a guy walking, and I recognized him from the hostel. So as we get to the entrance of the subway, that subway entrance was actually closed, so we couldn't go inside. And this little bit of inconvenience made us strike up a conversation. So we had this conversation and exchanged the usual, where you're from, what are you doing here, type things. And then I told him it was my birthday and I had no plan, and I was heading off into New York to just see what happens. So he was on his way to meet a bunch of friends for lunch, and he invited me to with. So I headed off with him to Williamsburg and ended up having lunch with a bunch of amazing people from all around the world who had been working in New York. I think they were all in advertising or marketing, and they were just, yeah, it was really nice to hang out with them. After that, we went to the park, and the park had a beautiful view of the Brooklyn Bridge. And we sat down in this park to have a little bit of picnic in the in the afternoon. And in the distance, there was salsa music playing. And I'm a salsa dancer, so I just took that as a sign of magic from the universe that this is exactly where I needed to be on my birthday, with the sun shining, sitting in a park with this amazing view of New York skyline and the Brooklyn Bridge, just with these two really cool, nice, interesting people hanging out. Then in the afternoon, we headed off and we went to a bar. We went to go watch the sunset, and we on the rooftop of some bar. We walked around for a bit. We met up with other friends. It just turned into such a random, cool night where we just did so much. I remember coming back to the hostel, having my mind blown by this amazing random day that just happened. It just happened. I had no plan. I just went with it, and my first 48 hours in New York had already been incredible. Very little sleep, but it was just incredible. So I was there for 10 days, and most of my trip was like that. I didn't plan a lot of things. The first bit of I was staying at the New York hostel, loft hostel, and then second I couch surfed with a really cool guy as well. And he showed me some hidden gems, and I got to hang out with him and take him to salsa and hang out with his friends, and also had quite a magical experience with just hanging out with a true traveler, true couch surfer. It's very rare nowadays that you find those people out in the world. But yeah, my New York trip, which was supposed to be jam packed of all these things to see and do, didn't happen that way. It was more. It was exactly what I needed. It was magical. It was filled with unexpected adventures. It was filled with interesting characters. There was so much of it where I just couldn't believe it was happening. I also spent a day walking around New York with a very good friend of mine and his partner, who I had met in Puerto Rico, and he gave me a tour of the city. And seeing the city from somebody who lives there is just something unique, because then you get to hear the stories of how they saw it when they were growing up, and their hidden spots and their hidden gems. But yeah, that was 29. That was my trip. I hope that from this little story, you can take away that your trip should never always be planned. That you should leave some space for magic, leave some space for adventure, leave some space for unexpected people to come in and just sweep you away into an adventure. Because that's the magic of traveling. That is the best part about it. It's not the interesting sights that you see when you're traveling. It is the people that you meet. It's the random adventures that you have. It's the unplanned moments where you're sitting with two people from two different parts of the world that you just met and you feel like you've known them your whole life and they're spending your birthday with you. And it's just incredible. So I hope that you all have a wonderful year. I hope that you plan some amazing travel. I hope that it's conscious travel for this year, because this is what the world needs. We need more conscious travelers out there. But also, I hope that you award yourself some free time in your travels to let the magic happen. Yeah, a big shout out goes to Argy and Christopher, Castor, Katie, Nico, Yandal, Kevin, just everybody from that New York trip. A big shout out, because you had no idea how much you helped me along that trip and made my travels amazing. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us on another audio adventure right here at Wandertale. Subscribe to our channel to stay tuned for more stories from around the world and share tales with the open-minded, the brave, and the curious.